Experts call this the worst case scenario.
Official landfall was 3:05 p.m., Category 4.
There are two factors at play, the wind and the storm surge, which is already as high as 10 feet in some places.
The winds were near 150 miles per hour as Ian made landfall.
One of my clients said this was the worst storm they've ever had in their career. We really got it handed to us, but because of our resources, because of our team spirit, because of our partners, we gave the client exactly what they needed. We had people all over Southwest Florida deployed everywhere that there was devastation. The resources is absolutely what this storm needed. From the moment the storm hit till now, we are still full-time.
It's pretty incredible. I mean, there were an estimated $116 billion in damage from a Category 5. It's one of the largest storms to ever hit Florida, and to have AECOM staff make the choice to separate from their families and separate from recovering from their own properties and assets to support the community and the greater good is pretty incredible.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we had to keep telling ourselves is we're here to help not only our client, but our community. And that's what kept us going.
So tell us a little bit about what that feeling was when we have a Category 5 storm hitting, and you're making the choice of staying with your family or helping our clients and our community respond.
It's nerve-wracking. I have two small children at home, 2 and 4, so making them sure they're safe with my wife was the #1 priority.
We were literally on conference calls while the storm was going over our homes. Wind's blowing outside, lights are flickering, and we still have cell service. We're on these Teams calls with our client and the contractor. So we're having to make sure these contractors are ready for what's coming. And no one really knew how bad this was gonna be.
Finally, the calm of the storm is passing. We're settling down, settling in, and I was able to get bunny ears up on my television, and I saw the Sanibel Causeway had washed out. And I threw on my AECOM shirt and jumped in my truck.
It was very quickly apparent that many, many roads and bridges were completely washed out, and access to Sanibel Island and access to Pine Island were completely destroyed. So people on the island couldn't get off, and emergency services couldn't get on by car. This is the Sanibel Causeway.
Okay.
And this is the big bridge, and then each bridge after that are low-level bridges, and in between there are spoil islands that washed away. So AECOM's team, with our partners, we were able to supply the resources to help our client get contracts written, get people boots on the ground, immediately provide emergency services to put the dirt where it needs to go, to provide temporary access. And this was one of those locations where an entire bridge abutment was gone, and they just had to dump dirt as quickly and as environmentally friendly as possible.
Right.
But that required a ton of people.
We came in right after the storm and immediately got to work assessing the damage out there. And one of our major tasks and undertaking, we're getting the traffic signals back up and running. You need to get the emergency services to these people in these communities and allowing them to respond, allowing fire rescue, police, and then people, like they're checking on loved ones. You're driving through intersections with down wires. It's an unsafe condition. So immediately we deployed our own staff and our partners. We went out there and just assessed the damage and got the contractors to work as soon as possible.
So how are we getting signals back when there isn't power yet?
Well, that was tricky. We had to deploy hundreds of generators.
So when we were catching up earlier, you mentioned that AECOM staff were even supplying their own personal generators once power was restored. Tell us about that.
That's right, that's right. A couple of AECOM staff, myself included, brought in a generator once. I was very fortunate to get my power restored very quickly. to assist with the recovery efforts. Just, it was all hands on deck, and you can't just sit by and watch someone else knowing you have resources.
So this looks like they used to be docks, but they were houses here, and same thing across the road. Those were houses on piles.
Stilts. Oh, wow.
And they're gone. So that's just a glimpse of what happened here.
So we're looking at the bridge to Pine Island, is that correct?
That's correct.
And can you tell us a little bit about the population of Pine Island?
Pine Island is a pretty big island, actually, and it is a mix of some rural land and farms and waterfront properties, so it's quite a mix. I think it's a lot of old Florida, generational people that have lived there a long, long time, regular old people, middle class, lower class, and you can see behind you some nice houses too, so things are changing.
Yeah. So what were the primary issues with the bridge?
Well, luckily the bridge itself was in pretty good shape, which is probably a blessing because that would have been a bigger ordeal. But this whole embankment here, this whole causeway was gone. So this was water. So all of this had to be filled with dirt, protected with rock, and then asphalt placed on top.
How long did it take for us to stabilize this bridge enough that evacuation crews and emergency crews could get across?
3 days.
3 days.
3 days working 24/7. In 3 days it was open to single lane traffic, so emergency vehicles and Florida Power and Light and their electrical contractors could get out there and get to work. We started with emergency repairs, basically just dump and go. Get it safe, get it opened up. Then the client came back and said, okay, now we need to do permanent repairs, resiliency repairs, so that this never happens again with a future storm. So now they've been able to assess the full scope of the work, get the funding from Federal Highway, and now come in, get the permitting, get all the proper channels that need to be done for a permanent fix. And so that's what's happening now.
I know we've had some AECOM staff that lost their homes in this storm, and we've had family and friends, myself included, that have lost loved ones during Hurricane Ian. So it's got to be pretty hard to kick it into gear, right? And focus on infrastructure when you're having such an emotional response.
I'll tell you what really helped is AECOM's resources. We were able to have folks that weren't even in the business of getting signals up and running that came in and brought food. I mean, the things that you take for granted, just having water and having a meal, it's the kind of people that our team here, especially, we just have that attitude. You got to get it done.
A lot of emotions come back, but I've had a lot of time to process what we went through. And one thing that comes to mind is just team, that team that we had.
And it's not just what you gave the client, it's what you gave the community.
Yeah, that's what got us through some of the harder days is telling ourselves that. And sometimes we had to give each other pep talks like, hey, why are you here? This is our community that we live in. I grew up in Naples, Florida. I've never seen anything like this in my 42 years. So for me, that's what kept me going, is I'm not just doing this for me or my client, I'm doing it for our entire community. And we helped a lot of people. It feels good.